Welcome to DroneCast, Rethinking Public Safety one drone at a time, a podcast by DroneSense. We explore real-world applications of drones and emergency response, offering a close examination of evolving trends in drone technology and its impact on public safety. I'm your host, John McLeod, Director of Customer Success here at DroneSense. Welcome back to DroneCast. I'm your host, John McLeod. In this second part of our conversation with Chief Michael Lighthiser, we dive deeper into the use of drone technology for VIP security and public safety. Chief Lighthiser sheds light on how drones are transforming security operations for high-profile events and dignitaries, the best practices for integrating drones into public safety protocols, and the impact of recent events on these practices. We also explore the crucial role of technology in enhancing situational awareness and the challenges and strategies involved in managing and advocating for drone programs in law enforcement. One of the, I think, unique parts of the part of the world that you guys operate in is there's a lot of VIP people rolling around that area for different reasons at different times. And they have federal, state, and local protective partners in tow with different missions. And we've seen more and more uses of drone technology to enhance situational awareness in those situations. Now, with the recent assassination attempt, former President Trump, I think some of these things are even more in the conversations today. So I'm curious if you guys are familiar with or have helped develop or have thoughts on the best practices of using that situational awareness to increase security and to provide better protection to the public. Have you had thoughts about that, particularly in light of the current events?
Yeah, so when we have a VIP come, whether it be POTUS, VPOTUS, FLOTUS, we've had all these VIPs come, and when there's a TFR up, we basically sit down with the U.S. Secret Service, Technical Services Division agent, the TSD agent, and say, hey, we have these drones available. If you need them, let us know. They, in the past, have declined for whatever reason, which is fine. However, I've heard through partners in the area that's changing post-Butler. But we talk through what that would look like if they were needed, right? We get their blessing to if, let's say, so the reality is if something is to happen, what happened in Butler is what we'll see. The dignitary will be whisked away, and then whoever's left will be holding the bag to deal with the aftermath. So our thoughts were we will immediately deploy the drone to get a bigger picture of what's going on. So we preload that with the Secret Service. We preload that with the FAA and the airspace management folks to say, hey, if this happens, we are going to call in and say ABC, we have the blessing from the Secret Service to do this. And we essentially preloaded so it's not a surprise to them when it happens. For, I don't want to say lesser, but for non-TFR events, we'll fly and we'll actually push the link and the video to whoever needs it on site. We've been fortunate enough to have, at one point, our law school is named after Antonin Scalia, the former Supreme Court Justice. It was named after him, and that naming ceremony took place. We had 7 of the 9 sitting Supreme Court justices in one building, which is basically an entire branch of government. Slightly nervous. But same thing, right? We pre-planned that. We had all of the assets available should we need it. We've also used it on the front side, right? So we've done mapping and modeling of routes for people, of the venue area itself in real time. So they're not going off of, even for us, right? Construction is pretty heavy on college campuses. If anyone's been to a college campus, they know the construction never stops. The ability to give them a map that was taken literally 4 hours ago, as opposed to even an image that's 2 days old, things change that quickly. So that's really helpful to give them a really detailed map of what's going on, as well as we've done some 3D modeling of the venues themselves so that they can see departure and arrival, so that their advanced guys can relay and show still photos. But to be able to show a 3D model is much, much easier for motorcade drivers and all that type of stuff. So the drones definitely helped not only for advanced work, but also for while the dignitary is on site, as far as the ability to check not only the venue, but also things around the venue, the route, all that stuff ahead of time. Really helpful for that kind of thing. And I'm hoping that will continue to evolve given the recent events, because it is an incredibly powerful tool in the toolbox that can definitely help. And if there's been a lot of talk in the media about maybe there weren't enough agents, maybe there weren't enough officers, it's not a secret that hiring across all realms really is hard right now to get employees. So if a technology can be a force multiplier and help offset that lack of agent power or cop power, whatever the case may be, we'd be silly not to use it.
One of the things I've noticed about you guys is you've been incredibly generous with your time speaking with other agencies all over the place who are working through starting particularly a law enforcement drone program. And there's a lot of hoops. It can be very intimidating. There's a lot of things you need to know and know well to be successful. When you talk to those folks, what advice do you give them about getting started that you think would really make their life a little bit easier?
So I always tell people, right, we don't have the way, we have a way. And it's worked for us. It may not work for everybody. But I think the biggest two things really to take away is either you're all in or you're all out. You can't be half in on it. And you have to have administrative support because it's a technology-based program. And what's in use now will be outdated tomorrow and will be super outdated in a year or two. So if you don't have that support long-term, you're not going to be successful. And then, of course, we'll circle back to what we just talked about. People. People are the biggest thing. The reason we've been successful is because we have people who I call them Kool-Aid drinkers. They are Kool-Aid drinkers that think drones are and will continue to be an integral part of public safety. They have and will continue to save lives in public safety. It's like anything. If you have people that are passionate about what it is and they go all in with it and really, really apply themselves, then you're going to be successful. If you don't have people that are all in, unfortunately, you're not going to be successful. And that's not just the drone world. That's everything. I'm fortunate in the fact that out of my 12 guys and girls, all of them are very passionate about it, very much committed to the program. And we have a very strong culture of everyone collaborates on everything. There's a strong culture of teamwork and they're very supportive of each other. So that's the biggest thing is find the right people to put in place, get support from the administration. And then if you're going to do it, you got to do it. You can't just go buy a drone and say, we'll use it when we use it. Gone are the days where it's a toy off the shelf. You're going to hurt somebody or worst case scenario, hurt the rest of public safety by doing something silly that's going to hurt the rest of the industry that's trying to do things correctly.
I love the other side of that same coin as well, too, which is agencies, I think like yours, I'll generalize a little bit, who started programs where there wasn't necessarily a checklist and a manual of how you do what you do. You had to learn a lot of lessons through doing, sometimes the hard way. Sometimes they were more successful, sometimes less successful. When you kind of look back at your program, are there things you say, maybe I wouldn't do that again, or maybe I would do it a different way that stand out?
For sure. And for us, luckily, this has evolved a little bit. On the equipment side, when we started, there was nothing that was really aimed at public safety. So our first drone was an Inspire 1. It either had a visible camera on it or a thermal camera on it. And when you flew with just the thermal camera, you really had no sense of depth or anything. And it's just not built for public safety. Still one of the coolest drones to date, one of the best flying drones to date. It has landing gear that retracts, for heaven's sakes. It's one of the coolest drones, I think, still out there. But there wasn't an equipment that was geared towards public safety. Shortly thereafter, we call it the Frankenstein. It was a Mavic that had a thermal camera like hard mounted to the aircraft. You had a separate tablet that you looked onto for the thermal. And that was like the fix, right? Until the Mavic 2 Enterprise came out. And that was really the first true public safety fix. So I would tell people, you don't need the Ferrari to learn to drive. Get a really reliable Honda Accord and go out there and do your thing. So when people are like, we want, for argument's sake, we want an M30T and this and that, you're going to crash your first drone. It's kind of inevitable. I think if you ask anybody, if I was to ask you, hey, when you first were learning, did you crash your drone? The answer is almost always yes. So get something that'll still do the public safety mission perfectly well, but get something that's a little on the less expensive side when you learn, because there's a lot of more affordable things out there that'll do the public safety mission perfectly acceptable. And you'll solve cases and make great finds and great stuff with it before you go all in. Because if you go all in and have some failures, my guess is your administration is going to be like, why am I throwing money at this? And large amounts of money. Once you make some wins, it's easier to go back to the purse strings and say, hey, we've had these successes. Let's upgrade the program. So equipment was a big one. And then honestly, changing my role to administrator, for putting on my administrative hat, the ability to manage the backside of it. So all the data, all of the images and video, all of the evidence side, as well as the flight logs and all this other stuff is important, because I think most every cop you talk to, people's civil liberties are very important. Their right to privacy, all these other things are important. When we get, for instance, a FOIA request or anything that shows, hey, you were looking at John's daughter through the window, the ability to show that didn't happen is equally as important as finding the bad guy. Because if you're unable to show that you're doing things right, you're doing things wrong. You know what I mean? You may not be doing them wrong, but if you can't prove you're doing them right, you're doing them wrong. The ability to show that your program is on the up and up, so to speak, is important. Obviously, we use DroneSense for all that side of the house, but I think regardless of what software program you use or management program you use, the management side is very important. No one, you get into law enforcement to run down bad guys and kick doors and do all this fun stuff. No one likes to go back and write the report. But at the end of the day, the report's pretty much the most important part of the job. That's what matters. So the management side is definitely something that I don't want to say we overlooked, but we definitely didn't put as much effort into off the start. That is definitely something that I think is even more important now in 2024.
You've been on the steering committee for the Law Enforcement Drone Association for at least a minute now. I was curious if you could tell us a little bit about what you guys have been working on.
Yeah, so actually, I'm hosting an event next Thursday and Friday over here in Manassas, Virginia. We're doing a night operations workshop, which will be cool. It'll be focused, essentially, we're going to be running from 1 in the evening until 10 at night doing night stuff. So that's, bad guys like to come out at night. So it's important to be able to operate in the dark. And we've actually been doing a lot of effort on education as far as the elected officials go for what public safety uses drones for. I think that this Butler event has kind of shed light on the fact that drones are a key part of public safety in today's world. And we need to fly the flag for the use of drones in public safety and how important they are and how they've really become an integrated part of how public safety responds to things. And the loss of some of these tools would be detrimental to the safety and security of communities and citizens. We've been definitely working to share that. And then, as always, we're working to get training out there. We're a firm believer in that training is imperative to a program and a pilot's success. So holding lots of conferences around the United States, as well as putting out some good training standards for people. So if you're starting a program, hey, this is what we have found is the national norm for training hours per month, team selection, all that type of stuff. There's a free document out on LEDA's website that kind of outlines that from a national perspective. One of the more beautiful things from the steering committee is that we have members from all over the United States that communicate on a daily basis and share lessons learned from across the U.S. And when you boil it down, really, it's the same state to state. So what we found is that if it works in one state, it's most likely going to work in other states, with the obvious exception of certain state restrictions. Being in Virginia, we have one of the more restrictive drone use laws in place, but overall, how a program runs, how a program is successful is the same across the board. So we are working to share that and share getting good training into pilots' hands.
There's been a lot of conversation over the last few months about legislation that's emerging in the House and Senate around restrictions around equipment, particularly from countries of concern. And I think there's some coalescing of sentiment around that. Certainly our elected representatives feel there's some action that needs to be taken. Sometimes when I hear that conversation in the newspaper or on the news, what I don't hear is a lot of read-in from the perspective of the public safety community sometimes. Seems somewhat isolated in there. So I was curious, if you were to breathe into that sort of conversation, what would you want those folks to know about how it impacts law enforcement and public safety and what they should be thinking about as well, too, in your perspective?
From my personal perspective, right, I think if you talk to any cop in the United States and say, hey, would you like to have an American-made product that does what the Chinese-made products do? Every single one of them say, I'll buy it tomorrow. Where do I sign? What I think is of concern is that we have built our operations around certain technologies, certain abilities that these aircraft possess, and to lose that would be a huge step backwards. And in my personal opinion, we would be doing a disservice to the community that we serve and protect, because we may not be able to find that missing child because the thermal camera is not good enough. The battery life is not good enough. We may not be able to clear a house before SWAT gets in it, and heaven forbid an officer gets hurt because the interior drone is not good enough or what we are accustomed to, right? Is there tools out there that will do the job? Sure. Are they much harder to use? Maybe. Is the technology not as reliable? Maybe. Can we as a community come together and help get these American companies across the finish line and get them to where we need them to be so that they're on par? I would hope so. My personal opinion, I just don't think cutting out the competition is really the fix to that, as well as the fact that it's going to hinder the programs that are in place, right? I know in my region, if there was a ban put out on country of origin, every program would shut the door. There would be no more drone programs in Northern Virginia, period, full stop. So all of these successes that we've had would not be there anymore. We'd have to go back to either using the helicopter or just having no aerial assets whatsoever. And I think that's a disservice to the community because these tools exist. They have been shown time and time again that they're successful in doing the mission that they've been asked to do. So why cut off our nose to spite our face? Why can't we have some type of middle ground? There are solutions out there. You and I both know that DroneSense is one of them. A solution that provides some stopgaps from the argument that the technology is the issue. Obviously, the argument's kind of switched lately to more of an economic issue. There'll always be this argument. I just think that we will be doing a disservice to the communities we serve if we put these valuable tools on the shelf. And until there's a replacement that is sustainable, because we will also, something that's sometimes overlooked, and we've talked to some lawmakers about this, currently there's two different models. There's the buy once, cry once model where I pay X number of dollars and I have a drone and I can use it till the cows come home, till it won't work anymore. Then there's the subscription model where I have to pay a certain amount annually for this product. And that's not a new model to law enforcement by any stretch of the imagination. DroneSense, for instance, subscription model. Axon, subscription model. But it is a pivot as far as budgetary considerations go, to go from I pay $10 once and I can use it forever to I pay $8 annually to use it over time. That cost is far different. So we have to figure out that component of it too, because there's a lot of agencies that can't sustain the subscription-based model. They just don't have the budget for it. For instance, when we were down in Southwest Virginia, some of these smaller agencies, and we're talking 3-man departments, they have begged, borrowed, scraped together enough money to buy this drone, and this drone is going to change how they do things substantially. They'll never be able to pull together money to pay 4 or 5 year subscription fees. It's just not possible. That's definitely a consideration that I think needs to be taken, because how do we tell a community this tool's out there, but you can't use it, and your department can't afford to use the tool that they can use? It's very unfortunate. So there's got to be some type of middle ground and some type of common sense solution out there. I don't think you'll find anyone who is against the concept of having an American manufacturer with a successful American aircraft be used in the field. If you brought that to us, I think you'd have a line from here to Alaska of people signing up wanting to use it. It's just not, in my personal opinion, I just don't think we're there yet. Hopefully we'll get there soon. And working with manufacturers, if U.S. manufacturers are open to feedback and open to honest critiques, I think that will help us go a long way.
Pretty much not since forever, but in particular, since the George Floyd protests, there's been a lot of conversations within communities, and there's been kind of a bright light sometimes put on law enforcement in terms of how are they using their resources, what do communities and law enforcement owe each other, what's the right way to communicate. And we've seen pressure on agencies to say, hey, you're spending money on this drone program, you're spending time and resources and manpower. What are we getting as a community as a benefit for that? And I have seen different agencies really be pretty good marketers of themselves in terms of having an explanation of what that is, particularly through storytelling, talking about real impacts they've had in the community. When you are approached with conversations and questions like that, what sorts of things do you tell those stakeholders within the community to say, like, hey, this is a very valuable life-saving technology that makes a difference, and let me show you how?
Yep. We've taken a page out of the DFR programs that are out there, and we put all of our missions on our website. So full transparency, this is what we flew for, this is the time, this is the location. Go take a peek if you want. And then I jokingly, but not jokingly, tell them, I don't even have enough officers to go answer the calls for service. I'm trying to find guys to staff the street. I don't have enough time to have guys go fly drones and spy on the citizens. That's not even a possibility. I don't have enough cops for that, even if I wanted to. But the success stories, I think, that really hit home are missing juveniles, right? Autistic child goes missing. The drone is able to find them. And even some less successful stories in the grand scheme of things, right? A missing person who unfortunately has ended their life, we're able to locate that person using the drone and get that person home to their family so they have some closure, where it may have taken weeks, if not months, to find that person as well. So when you can relate it to how people feel, I think that's the biggest solution. Yeah, it's cool to show pictures of guys kicking down doors and arresting bad guys out of the house, but I can turn on Cops or Live 911 or whatever show is on and see that. What's often doesn't get the case is the less sexy, for lack of a better term, successes. And I think that's what actually helps, because if you have a kid or an elderly parent, you can relate to that. You can put yourself in their shoes and be like, man, you know what? I would want this technology to help try and find my loved one. And I can say, I would argue that Northern Virginia is a fairly politically charged arena, being across the river from DC. And we've had tons of people come out in community events and talk to us about the drone program. And after the conversation, I haven't had a single one who has been still anti-drone. We've had plenty of people who have been anti-drone going in and then leave thinking, okay, I can see, they may not be full supporters, but they can say, I can still see the utility. They may not go out and make a donation to the police department to buy a drone, but they can admit that there is a utility to using the tool. And at the end of the day, that's the best that we can hope for, is that at least they can see there is a utility in the product and that it does serve a purpose. They still may want to have a dialogue about when it can be used and when it can't be used and that type of thing, which is fine. We're open to dialogue about that. Just the ability that they recognize that there's a use case is a win, in my opinion.
I mean, those are great conversations to have. And I'm glad you mentioned the engagement sometimes changes hearts and minds and brings people together in terms of understanding the capabilities and the mission set, and that you guys are very aligned. And absolutely, to put your point, thinking about your loved one who could be in a difficult or dangerous situation and how they would benefit potentially from this technology. Something I think about a lot, not being in law enforcement, but being on the software side. How are we enabling all the good people who use our solution to do so as well? Chief, that's all the big questions I had for you today. So that means it's time for me to pass the mic to you. If you want to highlight something you guys are working on that you're excited about, or just shamelessly plug away the department, that's great too. And perhaps if you're open to it, tell the people how they can get in touch with you if they want to connect.
Sure. So we actually have a Facebook page for our UAS unit, so feel free to contact us there. All of our information is on our main website. We very much operate in an open door policy. So we have training the fourth Thursday of every month from 3 to 7, open to anybody who wants to come out. We've had upwards of 12 agencies come out to the training. Obviously, we're in Virginia. If you're around, feel free to come by. If you're in the area, feel free to come by. If you come out to DC for anything, feel free to let us know, and we'll be happy to do whatever we can to show you around, introduce you to some of our partners in the area. I know we've worked with some folks who are visiting through LEDA, actually got them the tour of the Supreme Court, got them in to see the Pentagon, some cool stuff that's in DC that those of us who live in the area take for granted. But for those of you like in Austin, for instance, it's cool for y'all because you don't see it every day. So by all means, feel free to reach out. We are very much an open door, open book type of program because we think that's how we get better. If look at our program and say, oh, have you tried this? Well, great, let's give it a try, because oftentimes you don't see where things need to be improved on from the inside. It's people from the outside give you a fresh perspective, and that's super, super helpful. So we've been lucky enough to have Ryan live down the street from us, so we harass DroneSense on a regular basis. They're very well acquainted to who we are and hear our gripes and smile and probably curse us under their breath, but you know what? That's business.
I promise you, I have not heard that firsthand for sure. And we are very grateful for your partnership, and particularly for taking the time to visit with us today, share your perspective, and for your service in the community and keeping people safe. We can't really thank you enough. It's great to get to know you better today. And thank you to everyone who's listening on the internet to DroneCast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning into the second part of our interview with Chief Michael Lighthiser. It's clear that drones are becoming indispensable tools for enhancing security and public safety, offering both real-time situational awareness and operational flexibility. Michael's insight on best practices, program management, and community engagement provide valuable perspectives for anyone involved in or interested in drone technology and its application in law enforcement. We hope you found this discussion as enlightening as we did. Be sure to join us next time on DroneCast. DroneCast, Rethinking Public Safety one drone at a time, is brought to you by DroneSense. To find out more about DroneSense and how our comprehensive situational awareness platform can help you fly, share, and manage your drone program, please visit DroneSense.com. That's DroneSense.com. And then make sure to search for DroneCast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are found. Please don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at DroneSense, thanks for listening.